Hello ladies and gentlemen, in this video we will be making a React Native component called a birthday picker. The thing that makes the birthday picker different than the standard date picker is that the birthday picker will have an optional year, as you can see here. The reason you'd want an optional year is because sometimes you know a person's birthday, but you don't know their birth year, so this component allows you to set only the month and the day. So let's begin. Okay, I've got a basic React Native application up and running, and at the top here I've got a date picker just for reference, and at the bottom is where we're going to build our birthday picker. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to create a new folder called components, where we're going to store a component, and then inside of that folder we'll create a component called BirthdayPicker.js. Inside of BirthdayPicker we're going to do the standard default stuff to create a component, so we'll say import React from React. And we're going to import a view and a text for now from React Native. Then we will do export default class BirthdayPicker, which extends a React.component. And for our constructor, it will take props and we'll call super props. And then in our render method, we will just put a view with some text here that says birthday picker. And in our app.js, we're going to import birthday picker from components/birthday picker. And down here we will display our birthday picker. And I like to do this every time I start, just as a way of making sure that I've created a component and everything is correct. So here we can see the birthday picker text. Everything's good to go. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is set up some basic UI for our component so that we have something to look at. So I'm going to come back to my birthday picker component and I'm going to import the style sheet and the picker components from React Native. The picker is the scrollable component here that we'll need for our month, day, and year. Down at the bottom I'm going to create a styles constant, so I'll say const styles equals style sheet dot create. And we're going to have a style for our outside container called container, and this is going to have a flex direction of row. And the reason for that is because we're going to have 3 pickers for the month, day, and year, and we want them all to line up in the same row. Let's go ahead and create some styles for our month picker, our day picker, and our year picker. And let's give each of those styles a flex of 1. I'm going to line these up a little bit so they're easier to read. Okay, in our render method now, let's add a picker by going picker. And let's give it the style of styles.monthPicker, because this will be our month picker. And let's also give our outside view the style of styles.container. Inside of our picker, let's add a couple of items for testing purposes. So we'll say picker.item. And we'll set the label equal to January, and we'll set the value equal to 0. Save and refresh and see how that looks. Here we have our month picker. So let's copy a couple more items here. Set them to February and March. Give them different values. And let's copy and paste this for our day and year pickers. So this one's going to have the style of day picker. This one's going to have the style of year picker. And set some values here, 1, 2, 3. And for year, let's say 1999, 2000, and 2001. Save and refresh. And here's what we have so far. Now one thing I don't like is that they're all equally spaced, but I think we're going to need a little bit more room for the months because those tend to be longer. Days don't need very much room at all, and the years maybe need a medium amount of space. So let's change our flex variables here. Let's give the month a flex of 3, keep the day at 1, and set the year to 2. Save and refresh. And now we see that we've been given more room for the month, a little more room for the year, and less room for the day. The next thing I want to do is think about how the user will pass in the date that they want to display in their birthday picker. One option is for them to pass in a standard date object, but since the year for the birthday picker is going to be optional, and since the date object contains a year, I'd rather have them pass in the month, day, and year separately. The way that I like to do this is by using default props, and the advantage of default props is it gives your component a default value in case the user forgets to pass it in, And I also use it as a little bit of documentation on how the component should be used. So up here I'm going to create static default props, which is an object, and I want to set my properties or name them as selected year, selected month, and selected day. And if I need to add any notes to the properties, I usually just add a comment over here to the right. So what we're going to do is say if the year is a 0, then that represents that there isn't a year. So we'll say 0 equals no year. And for our month, I do want to make a note that the month is 0 indexed, which means that January will be the 0 month, February will be the 1 month, and so on. In our constructor, I'm also going to initialize our state. So I'll say this.state equals, and we want to set the year equal to this.props.selected year, the month equal to this.props.selected month, and the day equal to this.props.selected day. So what this does is initialize our state with whatever properties were passed in to the component. The next thing I want to do is create functions that will render the picker items for the month, day, and year. So I'm going to create stub functions called render month picker items, render day picker items, and render year picker items. And just for now, we're going to copy and paste what we have so far into here and return those. So I'll return it like that and add some commas here. We'll take our current days and return those. And we'll take our years and return those here. And in place of inside the pickers, we're going to call this .render month picker items, this .render day picker items, and this .render year picker items. Save and refresh to make sure everything's working properly. Looks good. Now what we want to do is edit these functions to set the correct values for month, day, and year. So let's start with the render month picker items function here. And first we're going to create an array called month names. And for now we'll just initialize that with January, February, and March. And then what we want to do is map those month names to an array of picker.items. So here we're going to return picker.item, and the label is going to be the month, and the value is going to be the index. You can delete this, save and refresh, and make sure it's still working. Here we go. Now what I want to do is extract this function that gets the month names into a separate function. So I'm going to come up here and add a function called getMonthNames, and it's going to return an array of month names. So for now we will return this array, and I will have var month names equals this dot get month names. But rather than hard coding the month names, let's actually use the JavaScript date library to generate the months for us. So let's create a empty array called month names like this, and then we're going to create a loop that goes from 0 to 12 because there are 12 months in a year. And what we'll do inside of this loop is we'll create a new date, say var date equals new date, and the constructor for date takes a year, month, and day. So let's just pick any year, let's say the year 2000. The month that we want to set it to is I, our current loop variable, and the day doesn't really matter either, we'll just pick the 15th. And then to get the month name, we'll call date.toLocaleString, which takes a locale. We're going to set it to English US, EN-US, which is United States English. And then we'll give it the parameter of month long. So that's going to give us the full month name here. And then we're going to push that onto our month names array. So we'll say month names.push and do that. We can delete this return and instead return month names. Now if we save and refresh, we should get all of the month names. So if we scroll through here, we do. Now one thing that you may want to change about yours is you may not want to use the US English locale. So let's create a variable called locale. We'll set it to en-us for now. And we'll use that variable down here so we can change the locale. And suppose you want it to be in Spanish. You would type in ES for Español. So if we save and refresh that, now we can see the month names are in Spanish, enero, febrero, and so on. So let's create a function called getLocale. And I'm going to just return en-us. You could use some sort of logic that calculates the user's current locale, but that's not really the purpose of this video, so I'm just going to hard code English in the US. So up here we'll say this.getLocale, and it's always going to return us US English. Okay, before we move on to our RenderDayPicker items function, let's update our default props and set them to something a little more reasonable. So I think what I want the default to be is the current date. So what we can do is call new date, that gives us today's date, and then we can call get full year to get the year. For the month, we do the same thing, new date, and we call get month to get the month. And for the day, we create a new date, and we call get date to get the day. Then over in our app where we're actually calling the birthday picker, let's update our state and let's give it a year of, let's say 2000, a month of 8, and a day of 3. And let's pass those in as the properties to our birthday picker. So we're going to say selected year equals this.state.year, selected month equals this.state.month, and selected day equals this.state.day. Okay. All right, let's go ahead and implement the RenderDayPicker items function. The complicated part about this is going to be that there's a different number of days depending on the month and the year that's selected because of leap years. So let's first create a function, and we're going to call this getNumDaysInMonth. It's going to take a year and a month as an input, and it's going to return us the number of days in that year and month. So let's put a comment up here, returns the number of days in the given year, month. Now, one option you have is to create your own algorithm that calculates how many days are in the given year and month. But I think an easier method is to just take advantage of the JavaScript date library, which already has that algorithm built in. So the way you do that is you create a new date, and remember the constructor for date takes a year, month, and a day. So we're going to give it the year that's passed into the function. And for the month, we're going to give it month plus 1, which is the month after the month that's given. And then for the day, we're going to say 0. And what that ends up doing is, let's say that you passed in the month of April. By doing month plus 1, it sets the month to May. And by setting the day to 0, it actually goes backwards by 1 day and gives us the last day of April. And then if we call getDate, we get the day for that date, which would be the last day of April, and also happens to be the number of days that are in April. So we can return that, and now we have a function that gets us the number of days given a year and a month. So down here in our RenderDayPicker items, we can call getNumDaysInMonth. So let's set numDays equal to this.getNumDaysInMonth, and we need to provide a year and a month. So what we'll do is we'll pass in our state year and our state month, which is the current year and month that's selected in the component. Say this.state.year, this.state.month. Next, we can create an empty days array, and we'll just loop through the number of days. So we'll say var equal, in this case you want to start your loop at 1, and you want to use less than or equal to numDays to make sure that we include that highest day there. And then we will return that array. Inside of here we want to say days.push, and we want to give it a picker.item whose label is equal to i.toString and whose value is equal to I. We'll save and refresh. Now we can see we have more days than what we had before. Okay, finally we want to implement our RenderYearPicker items function. So what we're going to do is create a loop. First we'll create an empty array called years, and we're going to loop from our starting year to our ending year. So let's say var I equals, let's just start it off at 1900, and we're going to end it at the current year, which is 2019, I++. And then we're going to say, years.push a picker dot item whose label is equal to I.toString and whose value is equal to I. And since this one is going to have an optional blank year, we'll also add to the end of this array, so we'll say years.push, fix that, years.push a picker.item whose label is equal to, let's just put some dashes here, and whose value is equal to 0, because what we decided was that a year value of 0 was going to represent a blank year. You could use any value that you want. And then we will return years. And we can delete this, save and refresh. And now you see that our component starts at 1900. If I were to scroll all the way through, we'd get to 2019. Now this obviously isn't going to work dynamically, so we want to make these starting and ending years variables. So at the top of our function, let's create a variable called min year. We'll set it to 1900, and we'll set a max year. And in this case, we want to just get whatever the current year is, because it's a birthday picker, so we don't need to go anywhere into the future because nobody would have a birthday in the future while you're using the component. So what we'll do there is we'll say new date to get today's date, and then get full year to get the current year. We'll update these variables to use max year and min year. And just for convenience, rather than hard coding in the 1900, let's actually make this a property that the user can pass in with a default value of 1900. So up here I'm going to come up to my default props, and I'm going to create a new one called min year, which has a default of 1900. And then down here I'm going to call this.props.min year. Save and refresh, and we can come over to our app and actually set our min year equal to 2015. Save and refresh, and now we see we start at 2015 and we come up to 2018 because there's actually a problem there. We need to make our loop less than or equal to. So we'll save and refresh again. And now you can see the highest year is 2019. When we go one beyond that, we get the dashes, which would represent the blank year. Now, since we've added an optional year, what we need to do is make a slight change to our getNumDays and month function. And what we need to do is check if no year was given and the month was February, then we're going to return the maximum number of days in February. The reason is February is the only month that has a changing number of days, and if the year is blank, we don't know if that year was a leap year or not. So what we're going to do is add a comment here, and we'll say if month equals February and year is unknown, then we're going to return the max number of days for February. So we'll say if year equals 0, which is our flag for saying there is no year, and month equals 1, and the reason it's 1 is because month is 0 indexed, so January is 0 and February is 1, then we're going to return 29. Otherwise, we're going to construct this date with the valid year that was given. Okay, now what we want to do is notify the user anytime these values are changed so that they can update their data model appropriately. I'm going to collapse a few of these. And we're going to do that by adding a property they can pass in called onValueChange. And I like to put it in my default props because we're going to call this function, and if the user doesn't pass it in and we try to call a null function, then the component will crash. So I recommend always giving a default here. And it also helps you, like I said, with some documentation so that we know this is a property you can pass in, and it's going to be a function that provides a year, a month, and a day. And our default function just won't do anything. Now we're going to create functions for handling the case when the month, the day, and the year are changed. So let's come down here and we'll create functions here. One's going to be called onMonthValueChanged, and that's going to take a month, or it's going to be given a month. We'll create one called onDayValueChanged, which gives us a day, and onYearValueChanged, which gives us a year. Down here in our pickers, we will set the value changed properties here. So we'll say onValueChange equals this dot onMonthValueChanged. For the day, we'll say onValueChange equals this dot onDayValueChanged. And for the year, we'll say on value change equals this dot on year value changed. Now the important thing to remember when implementing these is that changing the month or the year can change the number of days that can be selected in the component. So if we change the month, for example, to February, we don't want to allow 31 days so that the user couldn't be able to select February 31st. So let's start with on year value changed, and what we want to do is check if the days are valid. So what we're going to do is say var max days equals this dot get num days in month, and we're going to have to pass in a year and a month. Now we can't use this dot state dot year because the year has just changed, but our state hasn't changed yet. So we'll pass in the year that we were given, the new year. The month hasn't been changed yet, so we can use this dot state dot month. And then we want to find out if we need to change our day. So let's say that we had January 31st selected. We switch it to February and we find out that there's only 28 days in February. Then we want to change our day to be, let's say, February 28th, which is the closest it could be to the 31st. So we'll say if this dot state dot day, the currently selected day, is greater than the max days that are allowed for that month, then we're going to set our day to be max days. Otherwise, we're just going to keep it at this dot state dot day. And then down here, we're going to say this dot set state, and we're going to set our year to the year that was recently changed, and we're going to set our day to the new day that we calculated. And the second parameter to set state is a function, so we'll create a function here. What we're going to do inside this function is call the this.props.onValueChange that was passed in by the user to let them know that a value is changed. So we'll give them this.state.year, this.state.month, and this.state.day. And just as an FYI, I can use this.state.year because when I use the callback for set state, it happens after the state has been set. So I don't need to use this year. Okay, we need to do almost exactly the same thing for the month because the month can also affect how many days are selected. So I'm just going to copy and paste the year function here into the month. But instead of passing in the year, we have to use this.state.year. And the month, we can't use the state.month because it's just changed. So we'll use the month that was provided to us in the onValueChanged function. And then in our set state, we're going to change the month to whatever month it was changed to, and the day to the new day that was computed, and once again call this.props.onValueChange. For the onDayValueChanged function, it's really easy because we don't need to recompute the number of days or anything, so we'll just call this.setState, and we'll set the day equal to the new day that was selected, and we'll create our callback here and call this.props.onValueChange, giving it this.state.year, this.state.month, and this.state.day. Finally, we'll return to our app.js file and implement the onValueChange property. So down here we'll say onValueChange equals this.onBirthdayPicker value change, and we'll implement that function here on BirthdayPicker value change. It's going to be a function that takes a year, month, and a day. And here we will call this.setState, and we'll set our year equal to the year we've been given, our month to the month, and our day to the day. Now you may have noticed that our birthday picker wasn't being initialized to the values that we passed into the property. That's because we never set the selected value for the picker components. So let's come down to our pickers, and we're going to set the selected value equal to this.state.month for the month picker, and selected value equals this.state.day for the day picker, and the selected value equal to this.state.year for the year picker. Save and refresh, and now we see that our default date is September 3rd, 2015. Although we passed in the year 2000, but we set our minimum year to 2015, so let's actually update that to 1995. Save and refresh. Now we see it's September 3rd, 2000. I can change this to whatever I want, and I can scroll down and get a blank year if I'd like to. So that's how you make a birthday picker component in React Native, and I hope you found this video useful. Thank you.